Welcome to Applying to College, Understanding the Process and Options with Dr. Marci Schwartz. Marci is the founder of Thrive College Counseling in Los Gatos, where she works with students with unique learning profiles. Marci has a wealth of experience helping students to learn the skills necessary for independence, and she can provide support in locating the best college fit to meet the students' educational and social emotional needs. Marci is also an Adjunct Clinical Associate Professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Stanford University. So welcome, Marci, and thank you for sharing with us your valuable insights and experience in the college application process and helping us to understand what options are available to students.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's wonderful to do these PHP webinars, so I appreciate you having me. And I think I'm gonna share my screen. Whoops. Do you need to stop sharing your?
I think you can just start your share. Yeah.
So welcome everybody. We are going to be talking mostly about applying to college, and I'm going to be going through just different components of it. I've given other talks more focusing on the college readiness piece and things you could do to prepare. I'm going to touch a little bit on that, and there's going to be some duplicating in slides as far as college resources and such, but the majority of this is going to be around the application process, with being mindful of the fact that I mostly work with students with learning differences or neurodiversity, so that's just, I'm mindful of that in all of the talks that I give, so that'll be a part of it. Okay, so we can get started. Today, we're going to be covering, I'm going to start out a little bit about what do I need to know, and just kind of doing an overview of things to be thinking about, and then how to be prepared for the transition. We'll talk about the accommodations, how high school is different than college, the application process, testing, SAT, ACT kinds of testing, and then thinking about when should you start this process. So that's just what we're going to be hitting. So let's go to our next slide, which would be this one. Okay. So one of the first things to start to think about, as from the student's perspective and the parents, don't know if we have parents and students or both, but on this webinar, but the student should really start to be thinking about themselves and who they are and what their strengths and challenges are. And these should be discussions that happen primarily as a family. Most students I know are not just gonna come up with that. It's something that, a discussion to be started. But these are things that will help guide the application process, and you'll see in future slides why these are helpful. But really understanding a student's strengths and challenges, where they are as a student. Are they a STEM student? Are they more of a liberal arts student? And those kinds of things. How do they handle reading comprehension? Do they want more of a technical program? And just being able to articulate their strengths and challenges. Also being able to understand the support services that they find helpful, how they manage in different locations. Some students love the heat, some students really dislike the heat. Same thing with the cold. Sometimes, actually pretty often, families that I work with, they'll say, we want our student to be mostly in the West Coast, but we have family in Boston, so Boston's okay. So families come up with location decisions all the time for various reasons. Some want urban, some don't. So getting a sense and thinking through the types of settings that a student would fit with. And then how to prioritize what is most important in choosing a program, and basically thinking about what are the areas that are must-haves for a student and what are areas that they can change. And I work with some students that they need to have that urban feel. They want public transportation. They don't want to have to drive. They want things easily accessible. They don't want to be far out somewhere. And that may be a student that may be an uncompromisable piece. And kind of knowing that really will help and guide the process. So just one of the first things to do is really start to think about who you are as a student and what you want. And then starting to find and think about college fit. So part of it is academic fit. There are students who, like example, people who are athletes or getting into, they have a better chance of getting into a college because of a legacy. But even if they get in, is that really the right academic fit for them? If the student really thrives with hands-on learning, but they get into a highly, very, academically intense environment where it's big classes and lectures, is that really the right academic fit, even though the name brand of the school may be, something that draws the family? So really thinking about where will the student thrive and be happy as a student. And one of the things that it's important to remember is that we go to college to learn. Like, this is an academic experience. And I think that gets lost a lot. And I see that in college essays when students forget to even think about the academic piece of it. And they talk about the clubs and the location, but you're there to learn. And what is it about this college that makes you want to learn there? Financial fit is a big deal, particularly now. There are private schools, there are public schools, and but then some offer merit aid, some don't offer merit aid. So there's huge ranges, and I'm not going to get into that piece of it, but you should know, though, that it is a question to learn about and ask about, because there are private schools that might have a sticker price of $70,000, but for a particular student, based on their academics and their credentials, they might offer enough merit aid that the cost of that private school is the same as a UC. And so, but you have to think through that and apply to colleges where that can work for you, and because that's not going to work for every college. Thinking about the student's learning style, I kind of touched on that earlier. There's different learning environments. Some are more seminar style and discussions. Some of the students I work with love that, because that's how they learn, by talking it through and hearing feedback from others. And other people don't like that. They don't want to hear what other people think. They want to hear what the teacher says. They want to take notes and they want to move on. And that kind of learning style is important. The available supports at a particular college, which I'm going to touch on more later, and then the overall campus environment. I'd like to really emphasize this. When you're researching colleges, some have, very significant Greek life, and that's where the entertainment, the activities, it stems from the Greek life, and that's a very different experience than other colleges who don't have Greek life. And some colleges are very competitive and edgy, and there's not a lot of cooperative, warm feel. Other colleges are just like a warm, giant hug. And there's such variability in the environment and the learning style. And there are some students who love that competitive edge because that's what gets them going and being their best. And others, it is not a good fit. And so really being mindful of the overall campus environment, and that also includes sports and spirit. Some students love that. Some students really don't want that. And this all kind of ties into who you are as a student and what do you want. It's more than just, oh, that college has a good name I've heard of. There's so many more layers to it to be mindful of. Okay, so that's that piece of it. Then we want to look at how do we work with students to become college ready so that they could go to those interesting and fun environments. So a couple of points that we'll go over. One of them, I'm going to go through some of these in more detail in another slide, but this is just for every student, an overview of study skills, writing skills, and testing skills. Those are skills that students should be working on in high school to feel like they have a sense of. I work with a variety of students, and some of them are very, very bright, very, very academically capable. They hear the lecture in their class and they know the material. They don't really need to study, and they do quite well. And those are students that at some point in their educational career, it might not happen till college, it might happen before college, but those students will find that all of a sudden they've maxed out and they actually do need to study. And those are students who will not have developed study skills for all of those previous years, whereas people who might not have been as academically capable, but developed great study skills, those students with the study skills will keep chugging along because they know how to tackle challenging work. those students who never had to figure that out, when they get confronted with challenging work, it's very hard. And so developing study skills, even if the student doesn't need them now, and I would like to make, if I can make that would be on that list of those study skills, and even if they're not needed, are still important to have. And I can say that 1,000 times if you'd like me to, because it's important. Writing skills are important too, but not as important in my mind as the study skills, because at pretty much every college there's writing centers, and there's some schools that when they're that freshman English class, the writing seminar, some of them, part of their assignment is that they need to go to the writing center just to kind of go there and practice. So that's just available to most students, and making good use of that is a great idea. And testing skills are important as well. Being able to self-advocate, I'm going to talk more about that a bit later, but a question students should be asking when they get into, stuck in something that they don't know what to do is, what can I do about this? Because that question, what can I do about this, empowers them to take ownership of the problem and figure out what they want to do to get, to problem solve out of that situation. And hopefully they will ask for help. But practicing to ask that yourself as a student, what can I do about this? Even if the answer is I'm going to ask my mom, is a fine answer, but you're taking ownership over the problem. And that's really a helpful thing. Working together, collaboration skills, time management. I'm going to talk about some of these a bit more later. College requirements for academics, being aware. I work with students with variety of disabilities and challenges. So some students are not going to go the typical route with their math or take a foreign language. It's just very important to understand the ins and outs of it. It's all fine. It's all, possible for us to work it out, but you just want to be aware of what academic requirements are going to be for colleges, because each college is going to be different. Being mindful of what you need to graduate from high school and get into college is one thing, and the academic requirements you need to graduate from college may be a different thing. So it's just good to, dig a little deeper for that. Email is very important. I've been saying that a lot today because with my students, because we're bouncing up against a November 1st deadline when applications are due. And I'm reminding all of the students that once they submit their applications, they're going to start getting emails, and colleges might have questions, missing information. And if they don't check their email, that's going to be a problem. So that's something that I've said a lot today, but it's important for students to practice. And then being independent, students don't have to learn how to drive, but these are just examples of just being able to take on these tasks. And when things say like learn to cook or learn to drive, you don't really need to cook when you go to college. I think many people probably know that you eat in a cafeteria. That's not the point of this. It's really, can students say, hey, I'm hungry, there's nothing to eat in the house, but I'm hungry, so let me make something. Let me make macaroni and cheese. And it's about taking ownership and being independent and having a need and figuring out how to have that need met. And that is a skill that you're going to need in college when you have challenges. Any questions yet, Diana?
Yeah, and so your talk, is it primarily geared for students who are on a certificate track or students on a diploma track, or does it matter?
So my talk is primarily geared to diploma track. Those who are on a certificate, it kind of does matter, because with their certificate, the path towards college is going to be different. There might be some steps in community college. So I don't know how helpful this talk will be around the college part if it's a student on a certificate track, but some of the overall knowledge around college readiness, what you can expect in college regarding support might be helpful. So yeah, that's what I would say.
So would you say that families who are considering independent living programs and that transition process would probably benefit from additional or different information than your talk today, which is geared more towards kids who are on a graduation diploma track, going and participating in regular education programs and intend to apply to a regular college program. Is that correct?
That is correct. I mean, I work with a lot of students who graduate on a diploma track from high school and do go towards independent living programs thinking that they, and still take college level classes, and they may get something out of this. But this is really geared to that student who's going right from high school to college, maybe take a gap year or two in between.
And Marci, there are professionals such as yourself that help families with that if their child is not on a diploma track and they're looking at independent living programs. Is that something that you work with families with as well?
It depends. They should definitely feel free to call me, and I'm more than happy to talk with them. And it's like a spectrum, and they're depending on the need of the student. I handle like a part of that spectrum who's not college bound, but I have colleagues that handle other parts. So once I understand what the student's needs are, what the parents are looking for, I can help them find the right spot.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to high school versus college. So in looking at the difference between high school and college is important, as we were talking about college readiness and thinking about high school students and thinking of high school students who are thinking about college and thinking about pieces of becoming ready and what the college environment might be right for them. This is going to be talking a bit about understanding what a student with learning differences is receiving in high school and how that's going to be different from college. And this is really important in getting ready for that transition, because if you don't know, if you're not really thinking through about what you're getting now and what you're going to, it's hard to plan for it. So the focus in high school is around the student's academic success. And the adults, the teachers, the parents, all, focus around the IEP and the 504, and they really find ways to ensure that a student finds success in their K through 12 experience, and that's the way it should be. The school has the primary responsibility for arranging the accommodation. So if it's identified that a student needs to have more time on a test, that's the school is the primary person responsible for making sure that the student has that arrangement. And the parents do have access to the student's records, and they can participate in the discussions around, obviously they're at the IEP meetings. Teachers can modify a curriculum and have a student do different work to help them achieve their success and meet their IEP goals. And tutoring can be listed as part of a 504 or an IEP. In college, it's different. The focus is not on the student's success. It's not that they don't want them to be successful, but that is not the approach. The approach is that a student must come to the college disability office with documentation, talking about the supports that they need. The student must advocate for their supports and saying, here I am, this is what I would like to have. Nobody's going to reach out to that student. And then the job of the college is to ensure that they're providing access to the student so that they have access to the curriculum. So if a student needs, they need extended time on tests, they need notes, a note taker, because it's hard for them to pay attention to the lecture and take notes at the same time in order for them to have full access to the curriculum. They are entitled to those types of supports. They're giving them access, but they're not focused like they were in K through 12 and trying to figure out how to make the student successful. It's up to the student to find success through their access. And so the student bears the primary responsibility for arranging those accommodations. And every semester, when the student gets new teachers, new professors, that student needs to inform each professor about the accommodations that they're entitled to. And the professor's not going to come up to the student and say, I understand that you get extended time on tests. It doesn't work like that. The student needs to do it. And that's where that self-advocacy piece is so important. Parents don't have access to the student records without the student's written consent. which is something that you can work with your student to have them sign if they're agreeable, and I can, well, there's information about that. Professors are not required to modify the curriculum and alter assignments, and sometimes professors will agree to do that, but I always caution students who are in college that to make sure that that's really going to be in their best interest, because if a student gets an assignment delayed a week and they hand it in a week later, that could be fine for that assignment, but everybody else in the class is pushing on and working on the next test or assignment, and now they're behind. And so sometimes that'll, students should make use of that, advocating for themselves and seeing if they can get an extension of a deadline, but it's not the same as it was in high school, where things can kind of wait up for you and you can kind of cluster some makeups together. Tutoring doesn't fall under disability services. Tutoring is available to all students. And so it really is up to the student to independently take advantage of the tutoring that's available. And here, so with that and knowing what college is going to offer, there's different levels of what a college will offer. And most colleges, all colleges who are receiving federal funding have to have at least the basic accommodations. And that involves kind of like what I was just talking about, like access to the curriculum, that's extended time on tests, lecture notes, note takers. If it's a visually impaired student, they're going to get books or, the audio tapes. Oftentimes assistive technology will fall under basic accommodations. So there's a variety of things that a student can get, but they're pretty similar in some ways to what a student is getting in high school. It's just that they need to, the student is now in charge of making sure that happens. Moderate accommodations, many more colleges these days are stepping up and providing additional accommodations for students. It goes above what is expected, and it's still often without a cost. And so each college is going to be very different in what they highlight. So there are some colleges who will have a big focus in executive functioning support or tutoring, or that organizational piece, and that's how they, step up additional support without a charge. It's just part of what they offer. And others might do more of a peer mentoring program. That's kind of where they're focusing. So each college is going to be different, and that information can help guide a college selection for a student. So they offer, like I was saying, time management, workshops, study skills. There's oftentimes a full-time employee, and that's really good when you're looking at colleges to get a sense of who's working at that disability office and how many students do they serve. So you can really get a sense of how overwhelmed and how capable is one of the staff members going to be there to really meet the needs of a student. So students need to self-advocate, and there's typically not a fee. So those are the first two levels. And then comprehensive supports, there's becoming more and more programs that do this, and there is an extra fee for it. And they usually have staff that's trained to work with students with learning differences. They oftentimes it's a center, and the student can show up there, and they will have an appointment with a tutor, they'll have an appointment with an executive functioning coach, an academic advisor, and they really create a plan for the student in the beginning of the semester about the services that they're going to be providing, making sure that it meets what the student needs. They're often almost like mini IEP meetings, really sitting down with the student and asking what would be helpful and understanding his or her learning needs. Typically, there's applications that need to be filled out. So once this student applies to the college, you can also apply to one of these programs that offer them. And they're going to want documentation of a disability. Many times it's fine to send in a 504 or an IEP, but there are, depending on the programs, it may not be. And so on each college website that offers a program like this, it'll tell you the documentation that they're going to be looking for. And parents, you can always call them and say, well, I had my triennial of this year, and this is the testing that I had, and I don't have exactly what you want. Is that okay? And they're going to work with you. You send in what you have. They'll take a look at it. They'll let you know what they think. And you should know that the reason why they want that documentation is so that they can tailor their program to make sure that they meet the needs of the student. So I have found that sometimes it's tricky kind of figuring out the paperwork stuff, but it's really all in the end to make sure that they're going to be a good match for serving the student. And it's good to know before you commit to that school on May 1st that this actually is the right program to serve that student. And so even though they're checking you out to make sure you're right for them, you want to be doing the same thing to make sure your child or you as the student is going to be a good fit. Okay. So Diane, if there's any questions about that, you can just jump right in, but otherwise I'm just gonna keep barreling through.
Yeah, keep on going. You addressed a couple of questions that people emailed me, so I'm just going to reiterate some of those points in the chat.
Okay, so now that gave us a vision of college and the supports that students can be expecting to get depending on the college that they choose. And I'm going to go through now in a little bit more detail. I touched on some of these things earlier, but this is going to talk a little bit more about preparing for independence of college. So one area is the concept of self-determination, really encouraging students to understand what they want and making their own decisions for what they want after high school and what they see as their future goals. And this is an evolving process. It doesn't, most students that I work with, sometimes they'll say, I want to be in computer science. But even though they'll say that, the setting, what that looks like, things change. It's really very important that a student understands what their goals are and can understand the steps they need to reach those goals. So I get students saying, I hear a lot of, I'm going to go to Stanford because it's here. And they're not really seeing the steps to that. And I have found that evolves right through the application process, but it's the way it should be. And students that I work with from 10th grade to 12th grade, the change and the evolution of their development in a really positive way is wonderful to see. So working with a 10th grader and setting out and talking about self-determination and the importance of making your own decisions and thinking through what you want, I get a lot of responses. I don't know what I want and I don't know what to do, and a lot of I don't knows, and that's perfectly fine. And then we just come up with different ways of thinking about what the student does want. Do they want to be inside or outside? Really breaking it down so that the student can say, well, I love being outside. Well, then let's find some experiences that you could do now and build up more skills and ideas about what you might want. And so when it comes to really narrowing down college, the student has more information. But the self-determination piece is that real inner idea of what they want and figuring out the steps they need to get there. And it's our job I see as my job at least, and I know the parents want to do the same thing, to help the students really slowly and at a pace think through the different steps that they need to be guided in to reach their goals. And so those are really important discussions to have with students all throughout. And students change their minds, and it's perfectly fine. So another really important thing is that the students should be mindful of what modifications or supports that they're receiving. It's a question that I ask students when I'm first meeting them, and I understand they have an IEP. What services do you get on the IEP? They will tell me, and then I'll ask them why they get those services, and some of them don't know. So we talk about that, and usually the parents are there to help guide us, but that's really important that the student is connecting. I get extended time on test because I have dyslexia, and being able to put that together, because you could see how putting that together, all of a sudden, that student has ownership, they understand, and that you can see a student that puts together that sentence on their own. I get extended time on test because I have dyslexia, walking into a disability office in college and saying, I need extended time on tests. You don't even have to say the dyslexia part, but they'll know to show up because they know that they have the dyslexia. So being mindful and aware of what they're receiving and being able to articulate it when they want to is an important skill. Good study habits and organizational skills. The organizational skills is a big deal for students as these grades go by, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. And if you're a student or you're a parent listening and you're not sure about organizational skills, you might be a little shaky on those. My suggestion is to, I can make some book suggestions, but which can help with organization. But even I have found students having 4 or 5 meetings with an organizational tutor just to see what that looks like and finding a system that works for them. Sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes students need that more ongoing, but just being open to the importance of organizational skills. Self-advocacy skills I've mentioned before. And with self-advocacy skills, it's important to be able to advocate not only academically, but socially. If you're having trouble with a roommate, you need to be able to say something and talk to somebody about it and let somebody know that you're concerned. And so that piece, and also, it's in the dorms, it's with professors, it's all over the campus. That ability to advocate for yourself when you see something that is not feeling right, you're not feeling well, you don't know what to do, you need to be able to call somebody and say, I think I have a fever. Like, all of that stuff is important. Hey, Diana.
Yeah, so there's a question here. Do most colleges offer introductory workshops geared towards students with disabilities and how to navigate the college services available to them?
No, some do. Some have, but so those are schools that, like a situation where a student has identified themselves to a disability office. I'm sorry, I've been talking all day today. They've identified themselves to the disability office, and the disability office says, hey, we have this program where the students who are part of this program come 3 days earlier, they get a tour of the campus, they get to meet people, they get to settle in their dorms first. And so those kinds of things definitely happen at some schools, not all schools. Is that what you mean? Like a pre kind of getting used to? But there's not like a orientation, I don't think.
Yeah, I think they're asking about like an orientation to everything that the college could be offering through their student services office.
No, most colleges will do an overall orientation and they touch on that. This is the students, but I'll tell you, I've watched students look at those orientations and they get bored. So, if they're not, if you want to learn something, because there's a library tour and this is how you use the library and this is, how they're getting all of that. So if you're a parent or a student and wanting to be able to get oriented towards a disability office, you should call that disability office and let them know you want to help your child feel more comfortable, or the student calls. And I would definitely self-advocate. That's a great idea, but don't expect that to come to you. You should seek it out.
Right, right. And I think what we noticed recently was there was through the website, you can make appointments and schedule a one-on-one with somebody to talk to them. And
Exactly.
calling is an option, but I think these days most people are working remotely, so you would primarily just leave a message. So check the website for that type of information. And it doesn't cost any money to talk to anybody there or to get like your accommodations set up, right, Marci?
Correct. There's no fee for that, unless it's a fee for service program, but that's separate from the main disability office. And you can just send an email and set up those appointments. And there's a whole on the website for each college of their disability services, they're going to say new to us, or you want to, wanting to apply, are you a new student? And you just click on that and it tells you how to apply and where to send your documents and what the process is like. So there's tons of information. And they even have information like slides like I have, like, is your child college ready? Are you college ready? And they actually also have things like the difference between high school and college. So the slide that I had about that access versus success, like sometimes the disability offices will have that because they want to make sure that you know as you're entering their website that you know what your role is there.
Right. And what about in this preparing for college and independence? Some kids who are athletes, they are trying to figure out, what is the best path with disclosing? Is a school going to offer supports to support them in their learning disability? Can you give some perspective on the athlete that's looking into colleges?
So I can say in general about disclosure is that you don't have to disclose to anyone. It's up to you. It's selective disclosure. If you want the supports, you're going to have to disclose to the disability office because they're the ones who have to give you that official letter to give you those supports, but it's confidential, so nobody would know it. And so if
That's for everyone, not just the athletes too, right?
oh, that's everybody. I wasn't even thinking about the athletes. It's everybody. Yeah, and so when you are going up to your professor, say you have ADHD and you don't want anyone to know, and you're going but you get extended time on tests. All they're going to know is that you get extended time on tests. They're not going to know why unless you tell them, and that's the disclosure part. And even giving that letter to the professor to say you get extended time on tests, and that's all they know, they can't say anything either. So nobody's going to know unless you tell them that you get extended time on tests. Then it's up to each student to choose to disclose. So it really doesn't matter. The athletic piece doesn't matter. Everybody is under the same umbrella. There's other people to think about disclosing to. If you're living in the dorm, there's the RA who you might want to go to for support or guidance, and they're trained more and more these days to work with students with learning differences. But it's up to the student to say, do I want to disclose? And you can even just say, I have some learning challenges. You might not have to say what it is, but you can let them know. You could say, say it's a student with autism and you have sound sensitivity. You could tell your roommate, I have sound sensitivity, but you don't have to tell them you have autism. So I think it's an important thing for students to realize that you own this. And you can disclose what you want to disclose as it works in your best interest. This is your piece. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And so even when dealing with sport recruiters, you still have the right to decide when you disclose in the same fashion as when you are applying for the college.
Right. I will say that I do not work with athletes, and when people with students with learning difference and are also athletes, I will either co-work with somebody else who handles the athletic recruiting because it's a whole life form in and of itself, which I do not touch. But I will also say that I do not know of any situation where a student feels like student has to, against their own desire, disclose a disability. Unless there's something about that sport that is going to interfere. So I don't know all the nuances, but there's nothing that I know of that you need to disclose. I have a feeling there's more to that question, but if the person who asked that question wants to call me afterwards, I'm happy to talk with them because I don't know that I'm answering that, but that's the disclosure answer. It's the student's information to disclose.
Right. That sounds good. And maybe also before you move on, in part of this preparing for the independence of college, and the student is trying to figure out, are they prepared? And they're still going through some course selection. So there's a question here about what type of classes what challenging level do they shoot for? Something where they risk getting, a really ambitious class where they're really challenging themselves and risk getting a lower grade, or trying to take an easier class and getting the best grade they can, maybe a higher grade. How do the colleges look at that, and what's your perspective?
So it's a great question, and you want to have a balance. If the student just doesn't challenge themselves and just gets A after A after A, but doesn't take any honors classes or APs that are available, just because they're trying to hold on to those A's, the colleges are gonna not love that as much as seeing a student who has a bunch of A's, and then challenges themselves, takes some AP classes or honors classes, and even gets a B, even a C, but hanging around that B, so if they end up not getting the A's, but they challenge themselves, that is what they're looking for. They want to see, again, students go to college to learn, and there's a desire to learn and push yourself, and that's what they want to see, is with that that balance. But if it's a kind of a student that's struggling, and then they just feel like everyone else is taking APs, so I should take APs, that's not awesome. So you want to have a balance there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Are there other questions from that, or?
There's another question here. It says, how much will a college look at AP classes, especially for a child with learning disabilities like dyslexia? Would dual enrollment be a better option for kiddos wanting to earn college credit?
So I understand the words that you're saying, but I don't really understand what we're trying to get at, because so if a student, even though they have dyslexia, they can take the AP and it's available in their school, there's not a lot of reason to take the dual enrollment class. The main reason to take those dual enrollment classes are for when that subject is not offered, or that they want to go to a higher level. So that's a reason to take dual enrollment classes at the college level. So I'm not sure. And also I'm wondering about the question and the dyslexia, and with the people, would it be easier to get accommodations, maybe you're asking? I'm not really sure, but let me say it this way. When you apply to colleges, your high school counselor sends in typically your transcript, a counselor letter, and they will also send a school report. And that school report describes your particular high school, and it says the number of AP classes that are offered, the honors classes. It talks about the extracurricular activities and clubs that are offered at your school, so that the colleges, when they look at the application of the student, they're able to put the student in context. And so it wouldn't make sense if calculus AB is offered at the high school, but the student took it at a community college. Not that they couldn't, but if they did, then there's a section in the application where additional information, they would explain why. I felt that the student could say, I felt like I was better matched with the learning environment at the community college, and that's why I took, even though the class was offered at my high school, I took it at this other place. That's fine, but it has to kind of make sense. So that's why I'm not really understanding the question of really understanding why you're thinking community college class versus an AP. Does that make sense? My confusion make sense?
No, I think that's about as good as we can do with that question. Thank you so much.
Okay, should I press on, or do you want to do some more?
Yeah, go ahead, and why don't you press on?
Okay, so just to conclude with this slide, preparing for the independence of just making sure to work on independent living skills and social skills, they're all really important, and go over those in more detail. I think I've done the other talks. Okay, so different types of college applications. This confuses families when they're first getting into thinking about college. So the University of California has their own application, and it has 4 short 350-word essays. The Cal State has a different application, and that there's no essays. And then one of the things that might be nice to talk about, what is the difference? I mean, you probably know which schools, UCLA is different from San Jose State, but the Cal State system, their mission is really to provide professional education. So you're going to see the architecture programs. If you want to be an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, like those types of like teaching certificates, like those are going to be at the state universities. So I've worked with students who are you know, at UC Santa Barbara, and they wanted to be an occupational therapist, that's not the school to be at. And then they end up changing to Cal State that offers that. So it's not, I know that there's obviously differences in caliber and all, but there's also different missions and just different ways of teaching. So just something to look at they have different applications too, but and different acceptance rates, but also a different mission. The common application is an application, I think they have like 800 schools that belong to the common app. And so basically you fill out a main section of the common app, and that's going to go to all of those colleges that you're applying to. And then there's then there's some college specific questions. So it really contains a student's applications in one device, one form, one application. It's common. And so it really makes it easy for students to organize things. There's one main essay, it's going to go at all of them. So you're not writing so many different essays, but of course they all have supplemental essays. And so it's just, it helps students to consolidate and organize and stay focused on their applications. It's a system, which you will learn about. If you haven't tackled that yet, you will see it. Institutional applications are colleges that don't have any of those other ones, like Western Washington has their own institutional application, which is, if you want to apply to their school, you go onto their website and you apply. Like there's no common app where it's this whole thing that's going to go to other schools. It's just their school. The Coalition for Access and Affordability is like the common app, but it's newer and it has less schools and it has some additional features. And then UCAS is for international schools. So if you want to apply to a school in England and such, then that's that. So that's just kind of orienting you to knowing that students, so right now we have many Common App schools have a deadline of November 1st, which we've been working towards. So just to give you an example, we're working on getting those out by November 1st through the Common App, and then we're turning our attention to the UC application. So we kind of plan it out based on the different application and then the due date. Testing accommodations. So it's important to be aware of having a conversation with your high school counselor about accommodations. Let me just also say, who even knows what's going to happen with testing, because it's very hard to sit for a test now with the pandemic. But if testing should come back, basically it's up to the high school counselor to do the paperwork to the College Board or the ACT to get you those accommodations that you would benefit from as a student. Mostly it's often, extended time, but there's different options. You can get testing over multiple days, depending on your needs. And so having a relationship with your high school counselor and advocating for that on the sooner side, like don't wait 2 months before you want to sit for a test and say, oh, by the way, I need extended time on test. Can I get that? Definitely look at the paperwork and the timeline beforehand. And planning ahead. So when you're thinking about applying for colleges, particularly students with learning differences, neurodiversity, time is what we want. It works so much better when there's more time. And so the students that I work with, we start right at the beginning of the summer and just really focus on this in a calm, not overwhelming way. And for the most part, it works out okay. I was just actually meeting with a student today where he even said, he's like, oh my gosh, like, it was so great that I started early. And I know he didn't want to. And I said, so if somebody comes up to you and says, when should I start my essays? He said, I'm going to tell them to do it over the summer. And I was like, that's great. So plan ahead with you and make sure that there's time for the essays, because students don't realize, and parents who haven't been through this in a while do not realize how hard those essays can be, not because they're so super tricky, but because they're different. And students are not used to writing essays like they need to write for these applications. And that's what makes it hard. And plus, this is a scary, intimidating process of applying to college. It's a big transition step for students. They know it. And so there's that edge of fear. So this is a tricky essay. And then they're scared and intimidated about this process. And students just need time to sit with it. And that over time, you can just watch the student get it, a light bulb goes off, they understand what's expected, and then they kind of ease into it. But there's that beginning time is a little fraught. So giving students the space to work on those essays and feel like they can get a handle on it is really a gift. And so letters of recommendation, building relationships with your teachers. I know it's hard because students are virtual now, but showing up for office hours, if your teacher offers that. I hear students, or they don't have school on Wednesdays or whatever it is, and then the students can stop by and have a conversation with the teacher. Take advantage of that, because that's how the teacher's going to get to know you. And so it's different times now, and so make an effort for a couple of teachers to get to know you in a more meaningful way. So when it comes down to writing those letters of recommendation, you feel like you have people that you can ask. There's early action, which is when you can apply to colleges early, like this November 1st deadline, but you don't have to commit to them. You're just going to find out early. So if you work and get your application in early, you get to find out if you were accepted early. That's really nice for students because there's still more time to apply regular decision. And if their first batch didn't work out in the way they wanted them, there's still time to send out more applications. Early decision is a commitment. And so if you know for sure you want to go to a particular college, you can apply early. And then if you get in, you need to withdraw your applications from other colleges. Most public schools do not have early decision or even early action, like the Cal systems don't have that. But like University of Virginia, they offer early action and early decision. So, but most University of Michigan does early action, but not early decision. So each one is a little bit different. So it's important to kind of know what schools you're interested in and the timelines. And then regular decisions, applications usually due around January, beginning of January. And to the question the person asked earlier about grades, yes, one of the most important things in applying for colleges that they're going to see on the application are the students' grades and their course selection. And so you really want to be thoughtful about the classes you're taking and how you're doing academically. And if you feel like your grades are falling, ask for help. That is an important skill. Hey, Diana, how are we doing?
Yeah, great. And on this topic of applications, can you explain a little bit about scholarships and how that fits in with the application period and timing, and how do they go about finding scholarships? And on the special needs or learning disabilities realm, are there specific ones for individuals with learning disabilities?
There are specific scholarships for different types of learning disabilities, but that will be something to research. And there are some websites that have that, which I could try to get to you, but then you're also can be eligible for, just any scholarship program. What I encourage families to do, though, is to look at what is offered through the school regarding merit aid. So if you apply to a college where you're probably, overqualified, you have high test scores, high grades, they're going to that college is going to make an effort to have you come to them, and they might offer you full scholarship. They can offer you, a decent amount of merit aid. And so that's probably it's not easy to do that, but that you don't have to because when you apply for scholarships, you're writing essays and all kinds of things. Those are outside of the school scholarships, and those can be very, very helpful, but there are smaller amounts of money and there's extra work on those essays. And the students that I work with, just asking them to write one more essay is tricky. So that's not a great marriage between those types of scholarships and the students that I work with. So with the families I work with, we tend to look more at the merit aid. And that's definitely accessible to many families, many schools. And there are some schools that just don't offer any merit aid, and you're going to know going in. So, there's some schools that, like Barnard, I don't think they offer any merit aid. So if you're going to apply, no, you're not getting anything, and then you're going to have to do scholarships. So I don't know if that, and there's also like University of Oregon, there's all of these different tiers. So you apply there and then they accept you and they give you some scholarship, some merit aid, but then they're going to say, write this other essay and you'll be, you know, we think you're eligible for this other gold medal thing and you apply for that. But it's another essay. So there's that balance.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, so it can vary quite a bit depending on the universities or colleges you're applying to as well. Okay. And then for the students who are planning ahead for applications and they've been trying to get a handle on what is the the actual culture of the campus, and they haven't been able to get on a campus tour. Have you heard anything about campus tours starting back up, or what do you think about how can a student maximize on getting a sense of the university that they're interested in?
So there's a couple of different ways. There's a bunch of virtual tours that most of the colleges have on their websites. They also have a thing where you can sign up for a virtual tour, where so you'll be led by a student, and but you're there virtually, so you're not really there, but it's really more of a one-on-one tour, so that can be helpful. There are what I find very helpful student panels, and they've recorded them, and they're typically on the website, so it'll tell the student, watch students answering questions that, what's the social life like there? What do you do on weekends? And a lot of those things that you usually would learn about a school when you're on the tour. And then you can also have the professors have been more accessible. Many, I would say many, about half of my students have emailed professors at schools that they're very interested in to ask questions. I'm interested in this program. Can you tell me more about it? And so they've been able to have some dialogue. And in that way, it's almost better because if they have a relationship now with this professor that before they probably would have just gone on the tour and I like the school and they wouldn't have dug as deep. So we look for the silver linings, but what's really missing is the feel of the campus. Like you hear students back in the day before pandemic be like, oh, I walked on the campus and I just felt at home. And that's the part that is irreplaceable. For places that you could drive to, you can still, depends on the school. The campuses are closed, you cannot walk on them, but they're starting to open up. So that might be something that you can find out about. Can you walk the campus? And if you could do that and just see the buildings and the air and the people that are around, and that could be helpful too. And also when you're doing that, look at the surrounding area. Are there stores around, or is it more urban, is it suburban or rural? And how does that feel? If you want a Jamba Juice, you're gonna have to walk 10 minutes. Are you okay with that? Or do you want the other school where it's like on the campus that they offer that? And those little things, even if you just walk the campus, you can get a sense.
Those are great ideas. Thank you.
Any other, was that?
I wanted to point out that one of the attendees posted a link, a Google document that has scholarships for students with disabilities there. So if you'd like to, you can copy that out of the chat.
Very helpful. So when should you get started? So I always say between ninth grade and halfway through 10th grade is when to start really thinking about, for the student, how independent am I at home? What am I doing? And the parents should be thinking, am I giving my student enough independence at home, and trying to increase that independence and seeing how it goes? Because the student's going to need some time to practice and feeling that sense of independence. And if it's not working out well and that they're having trouble stepping into independence, then we can work on that now. Best to see that now so we can address it, as opposed to just realizing, well, we've gotten into this list of 10 schools, but where are we with independence? I don't know. And then first starting on that, like that's not going to be as awesome as starting earlier and really being aware of the areas of need. And then also the student really thinking about what types of supports that they're benefiting from. And when I have had this conversation with students and they're really starting to articulate the supports that they're benefiting from, I really find that they've just become more of an owner of and they're like, oh, I went up to my tutor and I said this and I need that. And mom, why don't I have this? And I really could benefit from that. And I've also said to students, hey, how do you think you do with a note taker? A note taker, that would be fabulous. I would love a note taker. I'm like, I love you. Let's get you one. Let's figure out and so when the student starts to really become open, it's nice to see because they're embracing what their needs are, and you could just see they're just going to take off because they're going to get what they need, and then they're going to be able to be their best student, and then that's all we can ask for. So that's great to start to work on. And then really starting to think about the environment that we talked about earlier in the beginning about, urban, suburban, hot or cold, or seminar, or lecture, and hands-on, and really getting the student to understand where they're going to be at their best so that they can really have that focus in mind and target those schools that will be a fit. And then we also have, what if in the end, and I'm not ready to go directly to college, and thinking about that piece. And so if the work has been that you've kind of kept up on, asking some of the questions from my previous slide, it's important to understand the skills that the students can benefit from building when that they haven't mastered by the time it's time to go off to college. And so as long as there's an understanding of the skills that are needed, then there are gap year programs that you can apply to college, defer for a year, and go to different gap year programs and build those skills. What is a problem is that the student doesn't really know what they need. It's just that the adults are like, that she's not ready for college, but we can't articulate why, and the student's not on board with it. But we all just kind of know that the student is not ready for college. It just makes it harder to plan for a gap year. And that's why we want that work to be done in high school. So by the time we're making that decision, we're all on the same page about what needs to happen. And then there are programs to help students build those skills. And not everybody needs to go to a four-year college. And there are wonderful opportunities for certificate programs, apprenticeship programs, all different kinds of things where a student can have a career that may be more hands-on and just take a different path. But it's an awesome path, if you ask me. There's just so many positive things about that. So just be open to what's right for the student, and that students change and evolve, and you might go in one direction and move to the other, and vice versa. So, it's great to see the different trajectories that students take. We think they're going to be in one bucket, but they end up in another, and that's life, and it's part of this. So that's all that I have.